Hi, this is Donald, and this is my review of The Internet of Money, a collection of talks by Andreas Antonopoulos. The Internet of Money is a collection of lectures and talks given by a big-time Bitcoin entrepreneur. It was written in 2016, so still earlier on in the Bitcoin era, before things really took off. This was definitely a time of great excitement about Bitcoin. Now, I would consider Andreas, at least from what I've read about him, to be one of the visionaries and creatives behind the Bitcoin movement. To summarize this book, it's not so much a book, but rather just a collection of short essays. And it's easy to read and just pick up any order you want. On the flip side, because you could do that, it doesn't quite go super deep into any one thing, but it has a surprising amount of depth and thinking behind it. Most of these essays were read to the public at colleges or other events or Bitcoin conventions. How is the physical copy of this book? It's nice. It's actually really nice. It's bright orange. The graphic design is really nice. The paper is decent enough, and the design of the words and the spacing is made the book very easy to read. It makes a bigger difference than you might think, and this one was well made. One important thing to note about this novel or book is that this is really just a bunch of his opinions. A lot of these talks are about the technology, but a lot of it is also just speculating on the potential of the Internet of Money. And likewise, this is not investment advice. It's more of a theoretical, even philosophical viewpoint of things. It doesn't really go into great depth in the current market, and it's 2016, so it's probably not terribly relevant now, besides the theoretical, more philosophical viewpoints he gets into. It's not a dense technical read, and it doesn't explain the concepts in a very thorough way, which is okay. This is more of a primer book to get somebody interested, and they can look into more of the details themselves if they want. I found this book to be fascinating. The essays, while somewhat speculative, it was still also very interesting to learn about the potential of blockchains or peer-to-peer connection and internet and how that shapes money. The vision of decentralization, and also just the general philosophy behind the money and exchange of value. In that respect, I really enjoyed this book. I would definitely consider this book to be visionary, though definitely speculative, but I think a lot of the times they go hand in hand because you can never see the future. It's also exciting to read a book that's so optimistic and excited about the future. An interesting point, the author doesn't care if Bitcoin crashes or not. He's more excited about the technology behind it all and the integration of money with the internet. I found this book to be quite exciting and hopeful to read, and that's quite exciting. That's a great feeling you get. On the flip side, though, part of that might have just been the author was trying to sell the concept of Bitcoin and blockchains, kind of like an entrepreneur speaking to sell you an idea, right? There were a lot of big sweeping statements, and details were pretty vague, I'd say. And likely a lot of the things he said was probably overly optimistic. I do wish that the book went into a lot more depth. A lot of interesting concepts were brought up and lightly discussed, but very few things were thoroughly investigated, like really thoroughly investigated. The book was really just a bunch of ideas to pique your interest and get you thinking, but sometimes I just wanted to know more. For example, in Plato's Republic, the entire work starts off with some simple questions, but it leads to dozens of pages of dialogue and debate, very thorough. And you're just not going to get that in this book, right? It's very sweeping and wide and broad. I don't think a lot of the downsides of Bitcoin or this technology were even mentioned as well. It's almost like a utopic viewpoint of this currency. Maybe even like a communist manifesto. Everything's gonna change, bring down the tyranny of the fiat currency kind of viewpoint. And I think it would have been a worthy topic to just say, hey, this is some of the risks of this method that we need to really understand and get to the bottom of. Just even simple things like, if money is decentralized, like how can it be stable? Or if people give money value, what happens if someone gets a huge portion of the value or the market? What are the risks of no regulation? For example, the author points out that a lot of criminal enterprises used to use Bitcoin for their interactions. But there's probably a good reason behind that, right? Like, that might be foreshadowing some things. Also, in American history, without regulation, there were some massive monopolies. So are we going to see massive corporations like in a cyberpunk dystopian world? I don't know. If there's no regulation, is there any protection for the consumer? Like, what if somebody comes up to me with a gun and forces me to transfer all my money to him? Like, am I completely screwed? Like, is there no recourse for that? Any discussion about NFTs are also absent, and this book is, to be fair, way behind that era. But it's a kind of a revolution you wouldn't have thought of, right? Like, the currency, instead of being Bitcoin of 21 million units or something like that, it's pictures, and there's an unlimited number of them. And is Bitcoin really a guarantee in terms of security? I think I read that there are some stable coins that are supposed to be, as the name implies, incredibly stable, and then the value crashed on them somehow. I'm not too thoroughly acquainted with all this, but it seems like there's a lot of details and questions to get into, and not just on the technological side. And I couldn't help but shake the feeling that nobody really understands the potential or what Bitcoin or blockchains are, which I think it's fair because it's a future technology with theoretically unlimited potential and imagination. But at the same time, it's hard to pinpoint. And even Bitcoin, people basically just treat it as digital money, right? Whereas the blockchain movement is supposed to be so much more than that, but it basically devolved into online currency. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the author is clearly very knowledgeable about Bitcoin and blockchain, but even when he speaks, it kind of goes back to the speculating part. He really doesn't know, right? Most of his opinions are just speculations on what might happen. And that's fun and exciting, but at the same time, it doesn't give me too much confidence in the stability of this. The author does talk about Bitcoin and online coins and how it confuses people, but he only really briefly touches on that. Now, here are some quotes. Bitcoin represents a fundamental transformation of money, an invention that changes the oldest technology we have in civilization, that changes it radically and disruptively by changing the fundamental architecture into one where every participant is equal, where transaction has no state or context other than obeying the consensus rules of the network that no one controls, where your money is yours. You control it absolutely through the application of digital signatures, and no one can censor it, no one can seize it, no one can freeze it, no one can tell you what to do or what not to do with your money. Here we are today, and Bitcoin is taking on the entire banking system, the most powerful industry in the world. Guess what? Bitcoin's going to win. It's going to win for a very simple reason. It's not just going to win because it's better. It's going to win because it's open. In a world of tinkerers, of experimenters, of makers, open wins. The reason it wins is that it allows innovation to flourish at the edges. Now we can choose currency and a 5-year-old can create currency. Maybe the currency that the 5-year-old created has monetary value. Maybe it doesn't. Most likely it doesn't, but some will. We need to get used to a world where we have to judge currency not by who issued it, but by who uses it. Or rather, by how many people use it and what they use it for. Bitcoin isn't what you think it is. It's a platform. It's not a payment network. It's not a currency. It's not a banking system. It's a platform that guarantees certain trust functions. Would I recommend this book? Yeah, I would recommend this book to, I think, most people. I think especially if you're younger, it's a great read for teenagers and really gets you thinking. Now, a lot of it is speculative, but it's also a nice primer and it gets your imagination going. It's not too technical, which is a bonus, because a lot of people can understand the analogies. I think it raises a lot of good questions that get you thinking, even though, in all fairness, I do think the author doesn't address a lot of the questions or the deeper issues that would have to be resolved or understood better. The best thing about this book is that it gets people excited about the future. And who knows what'll happen with cryptocurrency. Maybe it'll take off in 10, 20 years. There was a big crash this year where it dropped, I think, in 50% value, but maybe it jumps back up right away. Who knows? Now, I do not recommend this book to serious investors or people already well versed in crypto or people who are looking for investing advice. And this book really offers nothing like that. And you're better off looking completely elsewhere. And that is my review of The Internet of Money. I hope you enjoyed the review. Let me know what you think below in the comments. I'm not too familiar with Bitcoin myself, but it's very interesting to learn about. Thanks.